Coming up on Global Business, Chinese President Xi Jinping inspects South China's Guangdong province to investigate marine aquaculture, mangrove protection efforts, and water allocation projects in the region. The International Monetary Fund releases its latest World Economic Outlook report as central bankers and finance ministers gather to take stock of the global economy at the spring meetings of the World Bank and IMF. And connecting the world's top brands with China's supersized consumer market. We'll bring you the latest from the third China International Consumer Products Expo in Hainan Province. Welcome, everyone, to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong in Beijing. Well, President Xi Jinping is paying a visit to southern China's Guangdong province. In Zhanjiang City, President Xi checked on local fisheries and seed engineering projects for marine aquaculture. He also inspected mangrove protection efforts and water allocation projects in areas neighboring the country's southernmost province of Hainan. The visit came after President Xi and French President Emmanuel Macron held an informal meeting in Guangdong's provincial capital last week. And for more on President Xi Jinping's inspection of Guangdong province, our Chen Ziyuan has more.
Zhanjiang, a city in southern China's Guangdong province, is an important development pole of the modern coastal economic belt. Its strategic role is set to reflect how Guangdong province strives to lead in the country's opening up efforts. It also demonstrates China's ambition in marine economic development. President Xi visited the National A63 Program Marine Aquaculture Sea Project South Base, Jinniu Island Mangrove Area in Huguang Town, Mazhang District, Xuwen Port, Guangdong Water Resources Allocation Project around Beibu Gulf. Zhanjiang is known for its seafood. President Xi listened to how locals have helped preserve the stock and develop its marine and fishing industries. He took a ride to tour the local mangrove protection area and also listened to how the city has maximized its water resources and distribution. Following President Xi's footsteps, we can also see how his visit sent a strong signal that Zhanjiang is set to serve as a comprehensive transportation hub as the government works to realize its 14th five-year plan. It means building a network supported by its airport, highways, high-speed railway, and seaport. The city is located right across the sea from Hainan Island province and its pilot free trade zone. Chinese President Xi Jinping was here on Monday. He called on Zhanjiang to meet Hainan halfway in its effort. The city's Xuwen Port is located in the so-called throat of the Golden Channel of Qiongzhou Strait. In addition, it has a significant historical background. It was the starting port of the maritime Silk Road in Han Dynasty. The modern Xuwen Port cut the sea voyage distance from Zhanjiang to Haikou by half. Travel time by sea has been shortened from 2 to 3 hours to just over 1 hour. It had assisted in accelerating the development of the Hainan Free Trade Port since 2020. In 2022, the city's cargo throughput stood at 254 million tons, an increase of 50% in comparison to a decade ago. The container throughput stood at 1.54 million 20-foot equivalent units, an increase of 270% over 2012.
Into the World Bank and IMF's spring meetings over in Washington, D.C., where moments ago the IMF released its latest World Economic Outlook report. Now, according to that report, the IMF believes the global economy is yet again at a highly uncertain moment, with both headline and core inflation remaining far above targets among almost all inflation-targeting countries. Private and public debt has reached levels not seen in decades in most economies and continues to remain at a high level. The recent tightening of global financial conditions is also hampering the global economic recovery. However, with China adjusting its COVID-19 policies, high-frequency economic indicators are once again gaining momentum. The IMF's outlook notes the reopening and growth of the Chinese economy will likely generate positive spillovers, with even greater spillovers for countries with strong trade links and reliance on Chinese tourism. Overall, the outlook said many economies are likely to experience slower growth in incomes this year amid rising joblessness. Over the medium term, the IMF believes prospects for growth now seem dimmer than in decades. For more on the spring meetings of the World Bank and IMF, let's get to our John Terrett in New York. Hi there, John. So what's the latest at the meetings?
Hey, Michael.
Hi there, John. And is there any review on China's economy?
Well, there is, and I'll get to that in just a second, but spring has truly sprung here in North America, and we know this because the IMF and the World Bank are meeting in Washington, D.C., and the Chinese have turned up for the first time in 3 years. There's a delegation there. There's lots of interest into who might be in that delegation and what they might say. A lot of people want to see them and talk to them. But, you know, recovering China after COVID and recovering India after COVID are being talked about widely here and in reports that are being published as being responsible for a full half of the global economic growth in 2023 and in the foreseeable future. The thing to remember, Michael, is that China is absolutely key to the IMF and the World Bank structure and the spring meeting. The thing is, these days, China lends more than they do. Now, of course, it depends on which metric you're looking at, which continent you're talking about, but essentially that is true, and China does it at a much more favorable interest rate than the other two are able to do. This gives China immense authority and influence within the IMF and the World Bank structure. And there is talk that one day China may distance itself from that and pull back, which will prompt reform, which many actually say is actually badly needed within the organization. But that very fact brings it into conflict with the United States. And there are tensions, as you know, on all sorts of levels between Washington and Beijing, but particularly over Africa, where China, and with the help of Belt and Road, is plowing billions of dollars into supporting various African countries. Well, now, this week, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, Janet Yellen, is going to push for urgent debt relief, one of the big problems facing developing countries at the moment, debt relief for the Western African nation of Ghana and the Southern African nation of Zambia. And this is after the US at the turn of the year announced $55 billion for Africa over the next 3 years. It's all part of Washington's pushing back against China's Belt and Road Initiative, particularly in Africa. The US very keen to try and win over, to best, as the Americans say, China in that particular continent. Michael?
Oh, John, at the top of the hour, the IMF unveiled its latest World Economic Outlook, with its global financial stability report soon to follow as well. So expand on these two flagship IMF reports for us in terms of their focus.
Well, it's really funny you should mention that, because there's a news conference going on now in Washington, D.C. They're formally announcing it in the city as we speak, but they did just release a document telling us what's in it. You're absolutely right about that. This is one of two that we're expecting today. So first up, the World Economic Outlook, and I think that the takeaway from what I've read so far and what I heard you talking about at the top of our program there is really the whole focus for the spring meetings this year and the year ahead is slow down and uncertainty. That's the takeaway. It's all about slowdown and uncertainty. So we've got inflation and debt not seen at levels like this for decades, according to the WEO. We've got tightening monetary policy. That's interest rates going up, affecting growth all over the world. A sort of triple whammy, if you will, for developing nations of inflation and rates and debt. And progress, as you said, the dimmest it's been for decades. It's all pretty grim stuff. In fact, it's more than that. It's very, very grim stuff, actually. And next up, in the next hour or so, we're going to hear the Global Financial Stability Report. They'll release that. My understanding is that's going to deal mainly with fragmentation in the global economy and the dangers of that, which is another way of saying the ending of the old sort of Cold War era world sort of norms, as it were, as the world moves on to a new sort of format and structure, with China very much at the heart of it.
All right. John, many thanks for that report. Our John Terrett for us in New York. Thank you. In time for a short break still to come here on Global Business. Connecting the world's top brands with China's supersized consumer market. We'll bring you the latest from the third China International Consumer Products Expo in Hainan Province.
The China International Consumer Products Expo is back for its third edition.
Over 3,000 of the world's top brands converge in Haikou
to showcase a full spectrum of high-quality products and services.
Spotlighting the hottest trends and energizing China's supersized consumer market.
Nous allons voir ce que cette hausse du pouvoir d'achat qui concerne 1,4 milliard de consommateurs signifie pour les entreprises et les marques.
Únase a nosotros en Haikou para nuestra cobertura especial de este evento.
and discover new exciting opportunities from China opening wider to the world. Only on CGTN.
To the third China International Consumer Products Expo in China's tropical island province of Hainan. Now, this expo is also known as the Hainan Expo, and our Xu Yi is here to explain the reasons that prompted organizers to locate the Consumer Products Expo in Haikou, the provincial capital of Hainan, and how this event became a growth catalyst for the Hainan Free Trade Port. Take a look.
So, why did the expo organizers choose Hainan from the very beginning? It had to be in Hainan because of its rapidly developing free trade port and its status as a major tourism and consumption center. As a free trade port, Hainan had several advantages such as convenient entry and exit. Since its establishment in 2018, Hainan Free Trade Port has seen rapid growth, with the total number of business entities in Hainan seeing a sharp increase in the last 5 years compared with the number in the previous 3 decades. The implementation of a series of policy dividends such as zero tariff and low tax rate has allowed more global companies to bring their goods into China at the lowest cost. The Hainan Expo is another national exhibition after the Canton Fair in Guangzhou, the CIIE in Shanghai, and the CIFTIS in Beijing, which is an integral part of the national top exhibition system. The expo brings immense benefits to Hainan besides having an impact on the consumption direction and trends at the free trade port, while creating new opportunities for entrepreneurs and innovators.
Meanwhile, our Wang Tianyu takes a closer look at how this year's Hainan Expo is different compared to previous ones.
I'm now at the China International Products Expo. It is the third time that the expo is being held here in Hainan province. As a reporter having a keen interest on consumption trend, I have covered the previous 2 expos. So let me brief you the highlights of this year's Hainan Expo and how does it differ from the previous ones. First, the expo is larger in both area and scale. The exhibition area is expanded to 120,000 square meters, which is 20% higher than that of 2022. Also, it is more international. 7 leaders of countries and international organizations attend the expo, and nearly 30 CEOs from the world's top 500 enterprises and industry-leading companies grace the event. Italy is the guest country of honor at this year's event. It presents 147 product brands across an exhibition area of 1,800 square meters, doubling the number of brands that the guest of honor brought last year. Well, over 1,000 new products from more than 300 brands will make their debut here, covering sectors such as cosmetics, jewelry, beverage, and technology. A slew of global purchasing agents are seeking new orders through the event. But there's one thing that is not different from last year. We are still here. In the next few days, we'll bring you the latest report from the Hainan Expo, so stay tuned to CGTN. This is Wang Tianyu reporting from Haikou, Hainan Province.
And almost 150 luxury brands from Italy are taking part in this year's Hainan Expo. The luxury sector has been, of course, on a roller coaster ride since the start of the pandemic, with lockdowns initially devastating sales figures before the so-called revenge spending kicked in. Our Giles Gibson has more from Rome.
Italy is home to icons of luxury, from Prada shoes to Lamborghini supercars. Both brands are taking part in this year's China International Consumer Product Expo, a chance they hope to make up for some lost time after the disruption of COVID-19.
The percentage and the relevance of China as a target country is increasing because China as a consumption market is expanding. It's the second largest buyer of luxury goods in the world, following the United States. By the end of this decade, it will probably have from 30% of the global market share to 45%.
Through the Made in Italy slogan, the government promotes Italian craftsmanship around the world. This is Rome's Via dei Condotti, and it's where you'll find glitzy stores for Italian fashion houses like Gucci and Prada. But in recent years, those same brands have been making a large chunk of their profits in Asia, and in particular in China. But that same success left luxury brands like Gucci exposed during the pandemic. Gucci's year-on-year sales fell by 14% in the fourth quarter of 2022. With the easing of COVID restrictions in China since early 2023, though, foreign brands can once again try to expand their footprint inside the country. And with millions of Chinese tourists dusting off their passports, Europe's fashion capitals are hoping for a sales boost despite a tough economic outlook.
La domanda di beni di lusso.
Basically, the demand for luxury goods comes from certain segments of the population, and with such spending power, they do not have to give up luxury goods. Often, even when there is a negative economic outlook, some segments of the population continue to have steady income, and therefore the consumption of luxury goods does not slow down.
In a report last month, Morgan Stanley warned that strong demand from China could be so-called revenge spending, or consumers loosening their belts after saving during the pandemic. The US bank also suggests that Chinese consumers will be the growth engine for the global luxury goods sector this decade. Giles Gibson for CGTN, Rome.
Around 40,000 foreign exhibitors and buyers have signed up for this year's Hainan Expo. And they include representatives of companies from Belarus, Italy, France, Germany, and Switzerland. Now, here at CGTN, we spoke to Jörg Wuttke, president of the European Chamber of Commerce in China, about this year's event and its global significance. Take a listen.
The Hainan Expo is featuring more than 3,000 renowned brands from over 60 countries and regions. What has made the expo so attractive?
Well, Hainan was always a sleepy island. It was actually part of Guangdong until when I came here in 1982, first time. And then it developed into a tourist organization. Then they had all kinds of medical. And now they want to venture on to become this kind of Hong Kong or Singapore in many ways. So it's admirable that they are going down this road. And of course, with this kind of taxation on luxury items, it's a perfect match. You have tourism, you have medical care, as well as luxury items in the island of Hainan. And I think it's a winning proposition. I guess this fair is just one of the very early steps in a long route, and we have to see where it ends, because I'm sure that Hainan will just not remain Hainan. It might spill over into the mainland at one stage. So testing ground.
This year's expo will serve as a platform to show up China's dual cycle development pattern, relying on both domestic and international economic cycles. How will the event help boost the global economy?
Well, I guess it's too small an event, too small an economic item in order to have a global impact. But we should not underestimate the power of the Chinese consumer for luxury items. I think Chinese consumers stand for 50% of shopping of luxury items. And so it is very important for that segment, not for the global economy, for that particular segment. But of course, I hope that this kind of onshoring of luxury production, luxury purchase into Hainan doesn't mean that people are not traveling to Paris or to Rome or Milano again in order to buy in their shops. I hope that the ability of buying goods in Hainan basically just makes people more interesting to see where these products come from. So I hope that we can have this dual circulation, the kind of dual pleasure of having a consumer experience with luxury items from Europe in Hainan as well as in our backyard in the European Union.
Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva will start his state visit to China from Wednesday. China's foreign ministry said President Lula da Silva will be accompanied by a large delegation that includes major business leaders. Now, ahead of President Lula's visit, let's take a look at economic ties between China and Brazil.
两国元首共同签署了联合公报，并出席了其他合作文件的签字仪式。
So, trade between China and Brazil continued to grow despite the pandemic after bilateral trade exceeded $100 billion for the first time in 2020. It reached a historic high of over $170 billion last year. For more on President Lula's state visit to China and bilateral economic ties, I want to bring in Brazilian economist Karen Costa Vasquez, a non-resident senior fellow at the think tank Center for China and Globalization. Karen, thank you for joining us on the program. So we know that China and Brazil already have a solid economic relationship when it comes to the global commodities trade. How do you see the potential for growth in emerging areas such as science and technology, the digital economy, and sustainable development?
Thank you for having me on the program. Lula's visit is not just about bilateral trade, but more importantly, it is about realizing Brazil's strategic vision through the partnership with China. Lula has emphasized the need to initiate the energy and ecological transition towards sustainable agriculture and mining, stronger family farming, and greener industry. And China can be a partner in Brazil's transition to a low-carbon economy with its vast experience in reforestation and with its leadership in the development of technologies aimed at producing clean and efficient energy. And I also believe that sustainability, technology, and innovation are at the heart of China's 14th five-year plan and are central for the future of the Brazilian economy. So a win-win relationship necessarily depends on the robust cooperation agenda on these three fronts.
And Karen, according to the United Nations, over 80% of the world's population lives in developing countries. So raising living standards through development is so crucial still for the vast majority of people around the world. What does stronger China-Brazil relations mean for the global development in a time of uncertainty? And what does it mean for a more multipolar global financial architecture?
Lula and Xi Jinping leadership, they give Brazil and China the opportunity to mobilize action and resources to the achievement of the 2030 development agenda. During the visit, the two leaders are expected to sign a cooperation agreement in social affairs, which is a new front in bilateral cooperations, and also start the dialogue for the creation of a global alliance to fight poverty and hunger. And this alliance builds on Brazil's and China's experience in fighting poverty, the importance of Brazilian agriculture for China's food security, and also the need to redesign food systems to ensure sustainability, to ensure resiliency in food access worldwide, and especially aim at the Ukraine war. And with regards to the financial system, now we have former Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff as the president of the new development bank founded by Brazil, China, and the other BRICS countries. And Dilma has ahead of her the opportunity to position the bank not just as a financier, but also as a platform for ideas, a platform for partnerships and solutions from the Global South to the sustainable development of the Global South.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks for your thoughts on all of that, Karen. Karen Costa Vasquez, non-resident senior fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Thank you. And in other headlines, we're tracking at this hour, Chinese tech giant Alibaba is introducing its own generative AI model into the company's apps in the near future. This came after another Chinese company, SenseTime, unveiled a slew of new AI products, including a chatbot. Britain's Cineworld, the world's second largest cinema chain operator, filed a restructuring plan on Tuesday, aiming to cut debt by about $4.5 billion and raise over $2 billion to emerge from bankruptcy. And data from the Swiss National Bank showed that Credit Suisse has already paid back some of the 50 billion Swiss francs, or $54 billion it borrowed from the central bank. This may signal that the liquidity crisis triggered after the SVB collapse is ebbing. Well, earlier, our Michelle Vandenberg spoke to Fabrice Megarbane, CEO of L'Oreal China. Megarbane shared the company's developing plan in the China market. Take a look.
I mean, first of all, as you know, consumption is at the heart of the economy in China and boosting consumption from the past years. We've seen how much it generates also to boost the economy. And what we witnessed in the past years is what we call a bit upgrade, and premiumization of this consumption. And that we see more and more today, this consumption is going after a quality consumption and also sustainable consumption. And that's exactly what we've been advocating for the past few years. And we've seen even post-pandemic the importance, of the quality when it comes to products, but also the awareness about the impact of this consumption. What we see here today is the high-end, consumption in Hainan. It's been promoted, it's been also very much supported, and that's very important because it set also the standard of the quality of how this also market, will evolve in the coming years.
And how is the Chinese consumer market evolving in terms of demographic and also in terms of consumer habits?
We've seen that online and offline are actually very much going together. Consumers are not choosing between online and offline. Consumer lives in an omni-channel world. We call them phygital consumers because they discover products online, they purchase them offline, or vice versa. And I think it's very important when you are building, brands and you're engaging consumers is to think in this globality. And this is what we've been doing in the past years, really giving a role for the online and a role for the offline. And post-pandemic, we see consumers really very much eager to come back and discover services and experience and engage with brands. And I think it's very important for companies, particularly in our beauty industry, to answer to this need. And interestingly, we see young consumers, they're extremely sophisticated. They're the ones who has the most sophisticated routine. They're the ones who are also extremely knowledgeable about the products. They have a good recognition in terms of quality. And I think this is very important because for a market to upgrade, we should provide the best product and best quality product for the consumers.
As we know, sustainable growth is key in China's future development plan. How does L'Oréal practice sustainable growth?
Between what China government wants to achieve in terms of sustainability and what L'Oréal commitment since more than 10 years, in terms of sustainable consumption, it's a perfect match and a perfect strategic contribution that we can do in this market. We just signed last week, with the group of Alibaba, a circular economy project for 3 years. And we've been first, a few years ago, initiating the green parcels, with Alibaba, and now we're moving to the next step. And I think this is very important because it's showing a strong partnership that we have with our partners and retailers to engage in this green consumption.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.